Viewers, my name is Chris Omalwa, and I want to welcome you again to our show, Diaspora Life Show. In this show, we discuss issues that affect Kenyans living away from home, but from time to time, we also go back home and lend our voice on the issues that are happening back at home. For the last almost 4 weeks, we've been talking about COVID-19 and how it's affected the diaspora. But as you all know right now, the topical issue right now is the apparent constitutional crisis that is taking place at home. Recently, the Chief Justice, His Honorable Magara, issued a very stern statement to the President Uhuru Kenyatta that unless Parliament takes care of the gender issue, then Parliament should dissolve immediately. So that's what is happening at home. And today, we also want to bring in the diaspora voice. And it's my pleasure to bring these voices. Some of these voices are very key, especially the voice of Sister Mkawasi Mcharo Hall. Mkawasi is known for dual citizenship. She was once the president of KCO, Kenyan Community Abroad. And if you live abroad and you don't know about a Kenyan community abroad, then you shouldn't be enjoying the dual citizenship that we enjoy right now. So I advise you to go back to your history and understand how that came about. Of course, again, we have our teacher on the show, Professor David Monda, who has a way of breaking down issues, as it were. And of course, we have our writer and author, again, Washington Osiro from California, and our youthful guy who brings us back when we go too much off. Nathan Wangusi is a young Kenyan who has lived in Kenya, but he spent most of his life here. And as it were, he keeps on telling me that you guys are too Kenyan, man. You have to live in the world, because now the world is global. So it's my pleasure to welcome you guys to discuss this very important topic, and that is the gender rule that is in the Constitution. But for some reason, Kenyans have been behaving as if it doesn't exist. But first, we have to go to Professor Monda to just break it down for us in a minute what this war is all about. Professor, please break it down for us so that we catch up with the rest of the world.
So the big issue around the two-thirds gender rule is particularly in relation to our Kenyan parliament. The fact that our constitution, 2010 constitution, mandates that no elective body can have more than 2/3 of one gender constituting it. And the challenge in Kenya has been over the last 10 years, our parliament has actually not followed that element of the constitution, the 2/3 quota of the parliament. And as a result, just this week, Chief Justice Maraga wrote an advisory opinion to the president, and he said that parliament as currently constituted is illegal and it needs to be dissolved. This creates a lot of constitutional problems. So just to give a regional context, Kenya comes last compared to our East African neighbors, apart from Somalia and South Sudan. Rwanda is number 1, according to the Interparliamentary Union database that compares different legislatures. Rwanda is number 1 in terms of women representation in their parliament. They have about 38% of women, which is a pretty strong threshold because you always try and have between 20 and 40%. Tanzania is even ahead of Kenya. South Africa is up there. Namibia is number 9. And even Uganda is ahead of Kenya. Kenya comes up at number 91 out of 198 countries that are measured. So the big issue in Kenya is really about how do we implement the 2/3 gender role. There's one voice that's arguing that as it is currently constituted in our constitution, it's unworkable and it needs to be done away with. In other words, we need to forget about gender quotas to enfranchise women. But then there's another voice that's arguing that we need these gender quotas because for a variety of historical, cultural, and political reasons, women have been marginalized. So this is really the point at which Kenya is. We have both a constitutional but a political crisis in terms of the way forward and in relation to the 2/3 gender rule.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks, Professor. Sister Mkawasi,
Yes.
you, like I said, you're part of this. The constitution that we have that was enacted in 2010, you are at the center of it in terms of advocating for the diaspora and also the gender role. What did you guys have in mind when you when you suggested the gender role? Put differently, what did you aim to achieve?
By you talk about women.
Exactly, yeah. The gender women rule, especially.
Okay. This is my take. For a long time, I'd say since Kenya's independence and since we started having the awareness of the Kenyan patriarchy, the patriarchal system within the political setup, we know that Kenyan women have been fighting for a long time to have fair representation. And the 2010 Constitution was a place where Kenyan women had an opportunity to eventually fight so that there is fair representation politically for Kenyan in the legislature. And so they did. So the whole idea is to have fair representation. Here's my take. It's almost unconscionable that anybody should even oppose the idea of having fair representation. The fact that it's even a debate, tells us where we are as Kenyans. It shouldn't even be a debate that we ought to have fair representation along gender lines. This world has been constituted along dual gender for a long time. Now we can talk about other genders or fluidity and all that, but we talk about the two main genders, we have men and women. And if we look at Africa's history, this is very important because a lot of times as Kenyans, we behave as if we don't have a history. When we look at our own history as Africans, the idea that women were never represented is false. It's completely false. We have so many examples of women who were in leadership in public spaces. And what happened during the colonial time, that entire century, from the turn of the century, when colonization became something that changed our culture, changed our way of thinking, tore apart our institutions. And at that point, women were no longer in public spaces. The churches put women at different places. As a matter of fact, when the churches came, the women were told to sit on one side, usually the left side, and the men were taught to sit on the other side. And that was not our cultures as Kenyans. There wasn't this issue of separating. And men were taught to be the ones to stand at the front and be the ones to tell the community and the women what to do. Women were never allowed to stand at the front because they were told God does not like that. And that made itself manifest even in our politics. Kenyan men got it in their minds that, oh, we're the ones that are supposed to be doing this public space thinking. We are the ones that are supposed to be controlling what decisions need to be made for all populations, women and children and us. So they took on this. Now it's a subconscious thing that we now do not understand because we forget how the system came about, where men think they're the ones that are supposed to be in control. Yet we have already very good examples of women who are traditionally in public spaces, making decisions. And we forget that. Go ahead, Nathan.
So I'll disagree with one argument that you've made in regards to the fact that there is any question as to whether Kenyan society in general think that women should or should not be represented in either public spaces, but particularly in electoral politics or in leadership more generally. And the reason I say this is because we've had certain seminal events, and I think this is why we're having this discussion this week. On the Kenyan front, we have this proclamation around the 2/3 gender rule, that if it's not implemented as per how it was set up in the constitution, then parliament should be dissolved. And then on the American side, and we shouldn't forget that we've lost one of the most famous champions of women representation, women liberation in judicial and public spaces in RBG, who just passed away. I don't know if you've just seen the news, but also a woman has also been nominated to fill her seat. So I think the question we should be asking is, what is the right approach to enfranchise women into public spaces as well as into electoral office? The answer to that was given in Kenya was that we create an affirmative action program that is espoused in the Constitution. In the United States, that has been different because women have fought for those public spaces. And I fundamentally have a problem with any minority group which is historically disadvantaged, particularly in electoral politics, being given affirmative action. And I'll tell you why. Because what ends up happening is that you don't empower by disempowering, you empower by empowering. So what ends up happening when you do these affirmative action programs like the 2/3 gender rule is there is this sense that one on the recipient side of entitlement, right? And then on the other side, a feeling that these people are not qualified. So you're essentially disempowering women in what seems like an act of empowering them. So when they go to parliament, what you essentially need in elected leaders is someone who can master political will, who can master political capital, a good, an eloquent person, a person who can bring people together, regardless of gender. But when you provide a platform on which women get into political office without having those strong leadership values, then you're creating a problem, because now
I'm sorry, Chris. Just a really quick one. This is where I completely disagree, because I've heard that argument before, that what we ought to do is empower women. We're talking about women who are already empowered. We're talking about women who are already aware of what's going on.
Democracy does not owe anyone any favors, regardless of what it's
Go ahead, Osiro. Go ahead, Osiro.
Kwasi, I'll give you enough time to respond to that.
Okay.
But let me come back to Osiro. Washington.
Yes.
The fact that we are talking about this, it means there's an issue, there's a problem in terms of affecting the gender role. In your view, what's really at the core of this? Is it that we don't have enough qualified women to fill up the gender quota, or is it politics as usual?
I think at the core of the issue is power does not give up power without a fight. Men have gotten a sense of entitlement throughout the years, and they have built that sense of entitlement into the institutions that women are trying to get into. So the idea that democracy doesn't owe anybody a favor sounds good until you start breaking down how democracy has actually given men the favors that have allowed them to be in power. So in the chat room, in the WhatsApp group this morning, we were talking about the Electoral College. The Electoral College was designed to perpetuate white supremacy. I mean, that's a fact. The poll taxes that were instituted were designed to maintain white supremacy. And again, all these machinations were happening within the framework of democracy. So democracy can be actually manipulated to perpetuate the status quo. So I don't buy this idea that democracy doesn't owe anybody a favor, because it can be used in this case to set up a system that allows previously marginalized communities, including women, to be part of the system. And again, using an example that I gave this morning, if somebody is in a position to diversify their workforce, it doesn't mean that they're going to go and just pick anybody, because if they do that, they're not doing the diversification program a favor. They're actually making it worse by putting in somebody who's not qualified. What I would rather see happen is, have a decision to diversify the workforce, set criteria for getting competent, well-qualified individuals to fill positions that were previously given to men. And that, to me, is how we are going to change the population, the distribution of genders, in whether it's in government, whether it's in corporations, whether it's in institutions. So I think at the core of this thing is men who feel entitled, getting a sense that all of a sudden now their entitlement is being called into question, and they're not willing to share the. So
let me clarify.
Chris, can I also, if I may,
let me clarify my position so that we don't deviate from what I think is the main issue.
Okay.
So
sure.
we all agree that women need to be empowered. What I was trying to do is to draw a contrast between the approach that has been adopted in the United States, really well captured in the life and work of the late Chief Supreme Court Justice RBG. So what she did was she systematically changed the laws to allow for fair representation. One thing she famously said was that we are only asking for you to get your foot from off our neck, right? So it is very clear to me that women are competent, women are qualified. In fact, I said this earlier, that I think in terms of leadership, women set a higher bar because they bring the innate. They bring compassion, they bring reason, they bring diplomacy, they bring intuition, which men typically we lack. Men are very quick to react, generally as a gender, as compared to women.
Yeah, Chris. So
we all agree on that. The contrast I was drawing is that
yes,
it doesn't create a sustainable society where women are consistently empowered. It's providing affirmative action, because what that is over the long term does, it disempowers women, and we've seen that in Kenya. We've seen women.
But Nathan, I think
hold on.
Okay. You need to finish your point at some point.
We've seen women in parliament being disparaged. We've seen women in public spaces being insulted, and their leaders, because they say they did not get there by the worth of their intellect, they got there because they were put there as a favor. And I fundamentally have a problem with that. On all other issues.
So, Professor, before you answer that question, answer this just before you go to what Nathan has said. My understanding and statistics show right now that women are doing much better than men in all spheres, both at home and abroad. For instance, it's true that our ladies are doing much better economically, educationally than us in America, in Europe, and even back at home. So are we still talking about the same thing? Answer that, then also respond to what Nathan said.
Yeah, I think we really have to unpack that, Chris, because I do not believe that women are doing very well in Kenya compared to men, or even in the United States. And a very simple example, the last 2018 election in the United States, we had all this hullabaloo about how well women have done, but only 25% of our Senate is women. That's a quarter of the Senate, yet women are 51% of the population. Only a quarter of our House of Representatives in the United States is women, yet women are 51% of the population. We are not doing well. Secondly, when you look at Kenya, 95% of the wealth concentration in Kenya is in the hands of men. What Nathan's position forgets is a cultural and socioeconomic narrative and history. Women have historically been disempowered. Mkawasi, in parts of Taita Taveta and the coast, women couldn't inherit land. This is why 95% of the wealth and land tenure systems are in the hands of men. When women can't inherit property, when women don't have a way to access capital, that affects their political fortunes. So I really think we need to be conscious of a context. And I think as we discuss what we need to do in terms of the gender quotas, we really need to understand cultural and societal context. That even in the United States, the most powerful country in the world, we are still really, really way behind. On the index or compared to other countries of representation of women in our parliament, we're number 78. We're very close to Kenya's number 91. Rwanda is number 1. So we really have major issues. As much as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, let me finish. As much as Ruth Bader Ginsburg did a lot, she was just one justice. And her tenure was really pretty brief compared to the 400 years of patriarchy in this country. So as much as we compare the 2/3 rule in Kenya as a quota system, I think it's very healthy to have quotas. I think the issue is how do we creatively implement them.
David,
in the UK, they find a system where they can have their constituency seats, certain seats, like you could say, NARC Kenya would have a certain number of constituency seats for women, or ODM or Jubilee. They've worked it so that at the constituency level, women have a chance to be able to vie for these positions. That's not the case in Kenya, because if you don't have money, you're going to have problems. That's my content.
Let me address one question. Sorry, Chris.
I'll come back to you.
Let me address one question. So the first thing is, you've cited Rwanda quite a lot. And I agree. The numbers, if you look on paper, the numbers show that there are more women. However, how empowered are those women, even in those elective seats? Are they just there as tokens, or are they there because they have the political capital? Secondly,
Nathan, you're underestimating women. The fact that they are there,
I'm not.
They have agency. They have agency. Of course they're there. Of course they have agency. They're powerful.
I think there's something that I need to challenge on.
I have found it from Rwanda, so I would actually argue against that. So I think let's not get this argument wrong. So we're not arguing as to whether or not women need or do not need to be empowered. I think the argument is, how do we do it in the most effective way? What I'm saying is that I don't think that quotas are necessarily the right way to do it because of the inherent problems that we are seeing it play out as it is right now. So let's just make sure that we have that clear. The question is not about whether or not women need to be empowered. I would consider myself a feminist because I strongly believe that in terms of ability, my boss, my immediate boss, and the owner of the company, I work for a woman-owned company. And it's one of the best experiences I've had in terms of mentorship because the leadership is female. And
awesome. Mukawasi.
Yes.
Mukawasi.
Yes.
Versus having
this guy just Nathan just brought up the question that Professor asked you before we started recording the show.
Right.
Can you please address that?
Oh yes, I'm not surprised. The number of men feminists, men feminists in a lot of places, and I'm not surprised, especially if I understand Nathan has lived many years in this country. It's then when you feel that you have a position where you think you support women and the empowerment of women, you take on the feminist role, the feminist tag or badge. I think there are two concepts here. There's the feminist aspect of when you look at the history of where feminism came from and what feminists stand for, and how feminists came to be where they are and their effect in Africa. It's largely a Western concept. And there's the feminist aspect where you say the normal one, the pedestrian one, where you say, I'm a feminist because I support women's equality and women's empowerment. That's fine. Then we're all feminists in that case. Now, for me, I'm hearing a lot of doublespeak from Nathan, a lot of doublespeak. When he talks about he's not against women empowerment. At the same time, he doesn't support something like affirmative action because for him, it has inherent problems. For me, affirmative action is a tool. It's simply one of the tools that helps in that empowerment that he believes in.
I have not.
Now, the question is, let me finish, Nathan. Nathan, let me finish.
But
how long does that tool? No, it's not fair. Nathan, it's not fair that you come in between while I'm talking.
Yeah.
So let me finish my point before you come in.
Yeah.
I think that this is where your doublespeak comes in. When you decide that this particular tool called affirmative action does not work because it's inherent, it brings in inherent problems where it reduces the women, that it makes the women look weak. First of all, you're assuming that anybody who comes into power, any woman who comes into power through affirmative action is unqualified.
Exactly.
That is wrong.
That is wrong.
Somebody like, for example, for example, affirmative action. We have Black professors, Kenyan professors, who are in position right now in colleges because of affirmative action. It's not that they're not qualified.
I wanted to make sure at the beginning of this discussion, that we had clarity. And what I said specifically in electoral office, affirmative action in the civil service.
Even in electoral office, even in electoral office.
And in electoral office, what it essentially ends up doing is that it disempowers the
not
very.
Not if it's done. How so?
Explain.
I don't. Okay, so I'll not repeat the disparaging things that women in the Kenyan.
But that's a different discussion. That has nothing to do with the fact.
That's what this discussion is about, right?
No, I mean, if somebody like Miguna decides to disparage Esther Passaris, whose problem is that?
No, I'm not talking about.
I'm not talking
about that. So talking about.
No, what are you talking about?
Let me respond because there's a question that has been directed. So I'm talking about the characterization of women as being the word that has been used. In fact, I think it was the former Speaker of the Parliament said that the women in our Parliament today, and I think that also includes the Senate and the House, in our case, the National Assembly, are flower girls. And why did he say that? Because they got here on the favor of
that is patriarchy.
What is the difference? What is the difference, Nathan? What's the difference between being called a flower girl and being called a token black?
Let me just go on record. Let me go on record to say the most effective presidents right now, with respect to the COVID, the most effective presidents with respect to the response to the COVID epidemic are women through and through, and it's no surprise because women are more capable.
All right. So that makes sense. At least we've agreed on that. Washington.
Yes.
What I disagree though is how you go about the empowerment process. I think we need to have that discussion a bit more honestly.
That's true. We'll do that. But right now, guys, we have to deal with a problem. And the problem right now here is that the government, Uhuru's administration has been given 21 days by the LSK to implement the rule or dissolve parliament. So Washington, where do we go from here?
You know, I look at this is the equivalent of a consent decree by the FDA in medical device industry. They come in and tell you you're going to do this, this, and that. And so I look at I would look at that the CJ's directive, the LSK's directive from a systemic perspective. And I would recommend that, you know, if you put together a plan with specific milestones that you're going to be held accountable to, then you can actually say, you know what, yes, we violated this tenet of the Constitution, which from an ISO perspective is what is known as a major finding. So we have a major finding, you put in place a corrective action. And the corrective action is very specific. It's got milestones and it's got a timeline, and you're going to be held to that. And now it's up to the LSK and to the judiciary to agree on that corrective action and come back periodically to ensure that it's effectively being implemented. So that's what I recommend. That's how I would go from here, is I'd put together a corrective action plan that actually addresses the concerns that have been raised by the CJ and the LSK.
Thanks, guys. Let's end it right there. I go sleep and wait for next week. Thank you very much. This has been the Diaspora Life Show.
See you guys.
See you again next week. Of course, you can watch this show again on Facebook. If you go to standardmedia.co.ke, you can access the past episodes, past discussions. This show airs live on Standard Digital Videos at 7:45 in Kenya and 12:45 on the East Coast of America. See you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.